So thank you all for coming. This is the purpose of this meeting, this talk is in anticipation as part of what Dean Thomas has set up, that all of the department chairs that are doing, if they are willing to serve an additional term, or if there are other faculty that had wanted to serve as chair, it's an opportunity for chair candidates to present their vision. As Dean Thomas has informed me, we're all sitting over here except for Dr. Adrian. As the dean has informed me, I'm the only one that has put my name in the hat, so to speak. And so I thought this would be a productive time to treat it a little bit more like an open forum and have a discussion, because I think one of the things I want to do, and I try to do, but I want to do better, is really involve the entire department community in thinking about the things that we can do moving forward. And so I'd like this to be, to some extent, conversational. I'm going to present, I do have like a dozen or so slides. I'm going to go through the first ones really quick. It talks about some of the things that we've done over the past 4 years. And then I've just got a couple of really broad stroke slides for things that I want to do going forward. And from then on, I want to just have questions and or discussion. All right? So let's dig in. So here's my rough kind of overview or outline of what I want to talk about today. I started listing all of the things that we have done in the past 4 years, and I did that by a couple of different things. I looked at my calendar just to see all the meetings I went to, and I looked at the annual reviews that I would send for the department to the dean that had them kind of categorized by year, and then I realized I had way too much stuff, and it was way more detailed than was probably appropriate for this talk, so I've cut that all back quite a bit, but I've tried to categorize it into some of the things that I think as department chair, and as a department, I think some of the things that are kind of most important to us, and then I've just got a couple of slides at the end, things that I think we need to work on or that we can do better. So here's a laundry list of things that we've done recently, past few years, with regard to teaching. I left the first bullet point in just because it still has harsh memories for me. If you remember 4 years ago, at this time, we were in lockdown, I guess, is that right? Wasn't it March of 20? Yeah. We were in lockdown, and of course, I took over as acting chair in the summer of 20 because Dr. Hansen had a bunch of vacation saved up that he used up at the last part of his term. And so we did a whole bunch with COVID, but that's in the rearview mirror. But some of the things I've tried to do logistically with teaching, I've developed this new mechanism to determine teaching assignments with Qualtrics. That has turned out to be very helpful. We have a predictability of what classes are going to be taught. People can send me the things that they want to teach, and I have it all in one place. And so I'm trying to find more mechanisms to just make that process more efficient and timely. I'm really proud of the faculty in our department and some graduate students that have participated in the Big EO summer workshops. They have them specifically for COSAM, and our department has been a leader in that, and I think that's really good. For our non-major courses or our 1,000 level courses, one of the things that we've learned over the past few years is that those courses are being taught, this is an effect of COVID, those courses are now being taught at community colleges, not that they weren't taught before, but they're being taught 100% online. And so students are opting sometimes to take Physics 1500 or Physics 1600 online. There's not a lot we can do about that, but what we can do is try to serve the students that we have in those courses better. And so a few initiatives that we've started and that are ongoing. So I did a whole bunch of data stuff and law stuff to figure out, can they actually take an online lab at Sneed State and count it at Auburn University? And the short answer to that is yes, they can. But we now have this new course, for example, that Mike Fogel, and I guess Stephen Adams is teaching it now, I met with the School of Aviation a number of times and got them excited, or they got me excited. And that's now a course on the books where we pulled students out of either Physics 1000 or 1500, and now they're taking a course specifically designed for aviation majors. Now, that's a specific example of what I think is a really generally strong approach to teaching our non-majors and serving our community. One of the ways our college and our department is funded is by generating student credit hours. And so the bulk of the student credit hours that we teach come in those 1,000-level courses. And I think it's part of our mission to try to do as well as we can for those students. And so in that same thread, I've already had some meetings with the College of Architecture. It's a longer name than that, but I just call it architecture. It includes building science. To develop a course called Physics for Builders. So that's kind of the next one that I would like to see happen. Those students generally take Physics 1500. They generally struggle, and I think that if we can tailor a course to excite them and make it applicable to their career paths, it'd be stronger. We've initiated now with Dave Maurer and Matthew Holtfrich. We're starting that right now, a redesign of Physics 1000. Let's call it Physics for Future Leaders or some variation of that. And we're in the middle of a search for instructional support staff to help with teaching those courses. We've done a bunch of things to the physics majors curriculum. That's not certainly me, but that's us. A number of people have involved in that. We've codified a large number of special topics courses. Those are now in the system. We're doing more. We've converted our majors courses to 3 credit hours. The department funded equipment to create an optics course that undergraduates and graduate students can take that has been well attended. The initial plan for that course was to offer it every other year, but it's been so popular that we've offered it every year. In addition, we've done some things in the graduate curriculum as well. We're organized the way the research topics are more parallel for each of our 6 disciplines. So we have in our department space physics, plasma physics, if you organize it that way, lab astro / AMO, we have biophysics, condensed matter physics, and education physics. And we're setting it up in such a way that graduate students have a way to follow their career path in the appropriate courses. And then we've done a bunch of little administrative stuff. One example is we're taking this 8,000 requirement that was in there for what are now archaic reasons. A couple of highlights about our research. I can't take much of any credit for that. To some extent, most of what I do for research is get out of the way. I try to provide support where it can, whether that's with facilities, internal funding. But mostly this is due to our outstanding faculty in our department, outstanding faculty and postdocs. And from the department point of view, we cost share on various proposals, especially if those awards require them. If there's an internal IGP, I think is, or RSP, whatever they call it now, those internally funded things, the department funds those. There have been cases in the department where we had 2 or 3 that were really good, and they didn't all make it to the university level, but I still funded, or the department still funded the ones that didn't go to the university level, at least with the department cost share, because those projects were good. And we have various graduate students that are working on those projects right now. We reclassified Rick Stringer, which I think the experimentalists in the department recognized that was a huge deal because he was, frankly, a little bit underappreciated and underpaid. And so we've recently hired a software engineer on the theory side in terms of staff support. I think he's actually here. There he is. Hi, Yimvo. We're actually, because of the challenges at Auburn University, which are unfortunate, but I think as a department we can be nimble and respond to those with not only the university communications office and the college communications office. We're doing some things in-house for communications. That's in large part thanks to Raphael Bernardi, but also others. And I want to talk about that some more in some later slides. We've added a whole bunch of graduate-related research courses. I'm pretty sure I didn't include all of them in here, but here's some subset, at least, if not most of them, of specific courses related to research that we do in the department. And then the slide on the right is kind of our brag slide. It's an interesting thing. There are 4 ways to look at extramural funding. When you look at budgets, there's the fiscal year and there's the calendar year. You can sort the data 2 different ways. This happens to be a calendar year sort. And you can sort by how much money gets loaded into accounts, and you can also sort by how much money gets spent. I'm showing both of them. They tend to follow each other because if we get money, we tend to spend it. But sometimes there's a lag effect, and sometimes there's an integration and noise effect. You might get funding for 2 years at once, and so then that gets spread out over 2 years, and so there's an RC constant in that integrator that spreads that thing out a little bit. There's a whole laundry list of things that we've done with facilities. There's a lot more that we need to do. I'm aware of that. After 4 years now, I feel like I understand facilities, which, I mean, I understand the challenges with facilities. Sometimes I don't understand why those things are challenges. But starting in 2020, you know, there was a basement build out that was funded and frankly organized mostly before I became chair, but I was involved in some of it. The labs associated with that were the Gramlich, Jen, and Laurent labs. There was a big HVAC renovation in rear LSC, and of course, that was handled by facilities, but we had to coordinate where to put people so they could try to do research during that time. That didn't go as well as we had hoped. It took longer than we hoped, and of course, displacing people out of their laboratories is pretty disruptive for research. What most people may not be aware of is that we used to have an isotope laboratory in LSC in Leach that was managed by biochemistry. We were able to remove chemistry and biochemistry from that space, and then of course we had to go in and rehab that space to make sure that it was decontaminated. There's a whole bunch of other stuff. I'm not going to read it all. That'd be a boring talk. But we did a whole lot of other facility stuff. One of the things that we've had to do because we have so many more people, which is due to our growth in terms of graduate students. We have more graduate students than we had even 4 years ago, but certainly 10 years ago. We've got more postdocs. We've got more research staff. Is we've had to convert space in the building for what we called theory labs, just because they're on the front side of the building, and that's where we were generally putting theorists. It's been brought to my attention that those spaces are brand new and shiny and nice, and the experimentalist spaces are not. And so that's also something I think we have an opportunity to improve, and I would like to figure out a way to do that, and maybe even cross-pollinate so that not all the front side is theory and all the back side is experiment, but to figure out how we can optimize the use of that space. Here's some highlights of the things that we've done for the department community, and this certainly isn't everything, but I've been tried to be very supportive, especially from ground-up initiatives for doing things in the department. So for example, we now have a DEI committee, which we are about to change the name of probably in response to legislation. We can talk about that if people have questions. One of the things I initiated when I became chair and has been pretty nice is that we have a staff lunch. We try to do that once a semester if we can schedule it for the staff to meet and talk to each other, but also to talk to me about issues going on in the department. There's a number of graduate student led, but not really graduate student. SWIP is certainly broader than that. Organizations that have came up. When I became chair, one of the things I told the GPO, and we met with the graduate students in an open forum, I encouraged them to form an organization. I encouraged them to organize. And our graduate students are actually quite amazing in the sense that they've actually made a really, really well-structured and effective, I think, organization, the PGESA. And we do provide some funding for them. It's mostly funding for snacks or for lunch. And it's the similar kind of thing for the other one. We provide some funding for SWIP, for travel. We do provide some food for Gauss, which is the graduate students where they give talks to each other about topics that are actually, faculty generally don't go to those. I don't know that we're supposed to go to those, but the abstracts look amazing, and I'm a little bit jealous of the cool talks that are going on. And we've also provided support for Phys4 Inc. activities. And there's other things too, but I wanted to just give some highlights. I think one of the most important jobs I have, frankly, for the department is facilitating hiring faculty and facilitating retaining faculty if we can, and promoting faculty. And so, since I've been chair, this is I think, the list of all the faculty that we've hired that have joined the department and that have been promoted. And I don't want to be dismissive by just saying there's the list, because each one of these requires a lot of work to make sure that their packet's in place. I have to do a presentation on the promotion side, of course, negotiations on the hiring side. And I'm really excited, frankly, that we have all of these folks in our department now, and certainly all of those folks deserved promotion. And that was on their own merits. I just facilitated a little bit. Okay, so I just got a couple slides on some things that we need to work on. We did an academic program review last year, and that was really valuable. The review committee met with various stakeholders in the department. They looked at our metrics, and they gave us some feedback. And these were the 7 priorities in what they told us we needed to work on. These, call them opportunities, call them challenges, whatever you like. And so I've had these to some extent in the back of my mind and maybe even in the front of my mind on things that we really need to work on. And so what I've done is I've said that 1, 2, 4, 6, and 7 are to some extent in our control. Number 3 and number 5 are being handled either at the college or the university level. So number 5, the Research Center Initiative that's happening at the college level. Ed had that in mind for some time, but our academic program review actually initiated pushing him to invest in organizing that center initiative. Faculty salaries, I don't have any control over that whatsoever, except to say that the university, and if you've been to any faculty senate meetings, the university is pursuing a fairly substantial study by an outside consultant to compare our faculty and staff. Well, they just did staff with the Mercer consultant to compare our faculty salaries to peer institutions. So the other ones, I think we're spot on. If you asked me to self-identify the things that, look, our faculty, I know we have people that are coming, people that are going, but in general, our faculty is as strong as it's ever been in terms of quantity and quality, I will say. I'm very pleased to say that. I think our student population, particularly our graduate students, is probably as strong as it's ever been, certainly in terms of quality and quantity, both of those. But I think we can do better. We're not going to get 8 more faculty lines from the university. The provost isn't going to do that. So what can we do with what we've got, right? Well, I think we can get more graduate students. We actually have plenty of research funding, if you saw the earlier graphic. We need to figure out how to do that, right? I think we need to figure out how to also improve the number of physics majors that we have. We have roughly, I'll say in loose numbers, 60-ish physics majors, something like that. Many of them are double majors in engineering. And I think there's an untapped resource there in terms of increasing our undergraduate population. And I don't think it would put much of a burden on us as a department, because you can teach a class of 10 or teach a class of 20, and it's not so much more burden, but I think it actually would help us drive our outside reputation if we were to do that. Number 6 was we were advised to improve our relationship with IT support. It actually was, that's my language. It was slightly different than that in the academic program review, but I didn't feel comfortable summarizing it as fix COSAM IT or fix university IT, because that's not something we can do. But I think this is something that we can do. And when I say improve the relationship, I've already done that. We've had some meetings with the faculty to talk about some of the issues that we have with information technology support. Those meetings are now shared with the other departments in COSAM, and we anticipate having a full report to the dean this summer sometime on some initiatives that we can do based on your active suggestions for that. Renovate spaces for people. We're already doing some of that. We need to do more of that, and those were the recommendations. So I just think about what I spend my day-to-day on and the things that I spend a lot of time with. I'm at war right now with facilities, trying to resolve one of our professors' laboratories to get it finished on time. And there's that specific issue, but there's the bigger issue of how facilities can support the research and teaching mission of the university. We're now developing LSC 2182 into a space physics theory lab, if you will. If there's space in there, we might be able to rearrange it to include other graduate students and/or postdocs. For now, that's the working title, but I'm open to discussing that. I've heard very clearly that there's a caste system vibe between front leach and rear leach. And so slowly we're making some improvements to rear leach to help with that. Just minor quality of life things. We're going to fix up the nasty kitchen that's back there. We've already improved the lounge space where the experimentalists are. We're going to look into seeing if there's anything we can do to make the offices a little bit better. It's a little bit different for theorists than it is for experimentalists because theorists generally are sitting at their desk the whole time, and hopefully experimentalists are in the lab some of the time, but I understand this notion of wanting some comparable office space across the university. And I think that it's time now that I mean, especially with COVID, the first 2 or 3 years of me learning this job was me learning this job. And I think I feel more confident now or ready to thinking about bigger in terms of facilities. Mike Fogel is now, with Mark Adrian, is leading the charge on developing an outpost in Huntsville, for example, and that's going to be associated with facilities, but it's going to be affiliated with the Department of Physics, as I understand it. But I think that it's also, Chris Roberts just announced that they purchased this new building in the research park that has clean rooms and big spaces and high bays. As a department, we are, by multiple metrics, one of the most productive departments at the university. And so I think it's not crazy for us to ask for a seat at the table and those kinds of things. And finally, as an R1 institution, and we recognize this with some of our faculty that require instrumentation that generally is used across campus, Auburn doesn't necessarily have that instrumentation. And I've already had some meetings with Alan David, who's the ADR of the College of Engineering, along with Mark Lyles, our ADR, Associate Dean for Research, about their plans and our plans for shared facilities and how physics can have a seat at that table or a place in that. Here's another list of stuff. I want to work with everybody to make sure that we continue our community development. I feel like we've done a pretty good job over the past 4 years. There's some opportunities, I think, to make us more effective. And so I want to think about ways that we can do that. There's some really simple things that I think would actually be really useful. I want to develop some department-wide mechanisms for us to all be on the same page and just have a calendar or maybe an update page on the web so that everybody knows what's going on and you can have it right at your fingertips, important dates, etc. Recruiting. I think we have an opportunity to improve that, and so I want to restructure how we do some of that. I want to, frankly, I'm following Dr. Hansen's model I have followed Dr. Hansen's model for how we handle recruiting in terms of committee work. We have a committee chair that's an assistant professor typically, and a bunch of committee members, and the committee chair generally does a lot of the work, if not all of it, and I think that we can figure out a better way to be more effective, not only with recruiting, but integrating the recruiting and admissions process. And I want to involve the students. Our students are outstanding. Our students are excited and even want to serve the department because they want to make the department better. They want to develop the department reputation because they're our students, so the department reputation is going to impact their reputation. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities to involve the students more, especially on the recruiting side for both graduates and undergraduates. We got to figure out a way to improve our web and social media presence. That's a tougher nut to crack than I thought it would be because it's a lot of work. And then finally, there are still places where we need to do strategic hiring. Certainly at the faculty tenure track level, in particular research groups, but also at the staff level in terms of infrastructure. Infrastructure to support our research and to support our teaching. Even the office structure, making sure that our office has the bandwidth to support our needs. The reality is the number of proposals that go through our department is as high as it's ever been. The way we calculate, we just did summer salary for faculty, and the way we go through that process and calculate to ensure that we're compliant with federal funding laws, it's never been as crazy as it is now. I just spent half an hour today going through a long sheet, checking everything and signing off on it. And so there are opportunities, I would say, to buttress the excellent work we do to allow us to do even more. Recognizing that some folks are near retirement. I don't know when that is, but it's gonna happen. And that includes Jennifer, Glenda, Max, Dave Patrick. And so anticipating those retirements enough in advance to prepare and pivot and be able to use those resources wisely is something that we need to work on. So this is still a little bit vague, but if you look over on the side, I have very explicit orders from the dean based on my administrative review and the academic program review and you can look at it two ways. In terms of shared governance, to think of improving shared governance, improving involvement of other faculty, or to beg for help, which is probably as much. And so I envision trying to find ways for faculty to get more involved in running of the department. Historically, if you go back 12 years to Joe Perez when he was the department head, he was the one-stop shop for every single administrative function of the department. And then when Dr. Hanson became chair in 2012, he changed a few things. He added a couple of positions. 14? No, 12. I don't know. I just know that he quit in 20, so he must have been in 12. I was just subtracting 8, but maybe I'm wrong. Anyways, the point is that he added a couple of positions, but the problem is our department is really good, and they keep doing more, and they keep doing more, which is wonderful that we keep doing more, and we keep getting better, but we need, on the administrative and service side, we need to figure out ways that we can help lead some of those efforts to ensure that I have time to do a large part of my job that I feel like I'm running behind on. And by the way, I emailed a few of you about scheduling FARs. Please respond if you haven't yet. So here's kind of just a subtle changes, and none of this is locked in stone. I plan with the faculty to talk about this more in depth at the retreat. But I envision some structural changes to maybe even out some of the administrative load in the department. So I envision an undergraduate program officer that certainly does what we've had in the past in terms of advising students, organizing, serving on the curriculum committee. But I see there's really opportunities for recruiting there that we are sort of not doing. And whether that's coordinating recruiting and asking for other help, whether that's doing individual recruiting, I think there's a huge untapped potential. The two big ones I see, and I've talked about this to many people, is for undergraduate majors, our strongest undergraduate majors are often dual majors in engineering. I've already had a meeting with Mario Eden, who's the dean of the College of Engineering, and we discussed if he would be open to us recruiting his students. And the answer is yes, because we don't want to take them away from engineering. We want to value add to their engineering degree by adding a physics major, which is very doable. And if we were to get 1% of their students to participate, we would double the number of our majors, and they wouldn't notice. And so he was totally fine with that, and is actually going to help us connect with the right people to do those kinds of recruiting things. And in a similar way, the biggest major by far in the department, in the College of Science and Mathematics, is biomedical sciences. Those are the students that we mostly teach in our 1500 sequence. We have a biomedical track as a physics major in our department, and we get one every 3 years or something. It isn't much, if it's even that much. My anecdotal experience is that every single one of those has gotten into their medical school of choice. And so I think that there's an opportunity for recruiting really good students there too. You don't want to necessarily change a student's career path if that's not what they want. You want to find a way to value add and get them to where they want to be. And I think we can really offer that to them. I would like to codify and even maybe make a little bit stronger some of the work that Raphael's already initiated and create an actual communications officer for the department. I mean, this is the weakest thing that we have right now. There's so many great things going on, and not everybody knows about it, not even inside the department. I sometimes have faculty meetings or I'm talking to somebody, hey, do you know what such and such is doing, right? Like Dr. Konopka created a class this semester. I'm sorry to call you out, right? And it's apparently wonderful, and not everybody even knows he did it, right? I mean, there are all kinds of cool things that are happening, right? Somebody got this grant. There was this paper published in the Proceedings of the National Academy, or whatever. And so we need to do a better job as a group of making sure that not only is heard internally within the department, the college, or the university, but heard externally. And so until we have better infrastructure at the university, which I'm also going to advocate and frankly fight for, I think we need to do some of that in-house to make sure that it gets done. And so that's actually a really, really important position. The graduate program officer position as it stands right now is a pretty heavy lift for any single person, and that's something to be discussed of how we reorganize that. But it's frankly, I did it before me. I think it was JJ did it. Dave is doing it now. It's a heavy load. And there's also some things in the graduate program that we can improve, and I talked about this a little bit earlier. I want to really align what we do in recruiting with admissions. I envision some kind of a structure where the people that are recruiting international students are also involved in the admission of those international students. And the people that are recruiting domestic students are involved in the admission of those domestic students. Not just logistically, but outward facing as well. So I think that this assessment coordinator position we've had in the department has been very valuable. Dr. Park has done that for 4 years, and he's done an incredible job. It's very much behind the scenes, but there are a few cases where he's actively been involved in assessing. He certainly has been assessing of programs, but I think we can further develop the feedback loop and maybe improve our programs based on what the outcomes of those assessments are. And so that's my big, so what's your vision for the department? My vision for the department is is find for all of the incredible people in the department to help us make the department better. And so that's my 30 minutes or so of stuff I wanted to say, and the rest of the time I wanted to leave for conversation. So I'll stop with that. PsyCat.
I'll start with an icebreaker. Do you think you can forward this to us later on, so this will make us think about all the, I can't remember everything that you showed right now.
Yeah, it's a lot to keep in your head. Sure, absolutely. You can all share this. And we are recording this for the dean. Everybody say hi to the dean.
Hi, Dean.
Hi, Dean.
Yeah, JJ.
Hi, and thank you. So we have witnessed a lot of growth of the department since you and I joined the department. There's on the kind of a really, and we can also expect that actually there's going to be a plateau in terms of the faculty retirement. Is that what you expect?
I mean, I think that we are still not in equilibrium.
Okay.
I think we have opportunities to make a case for growth in certain select areas.
So for the new factor hiring, it's going to be a more like expansion rather than the kind of like.
No, I think well, this is my personal opinion.
Okay.
This is the kind of thing we need to discuss as a faculty. My personal opinion is that there are opportunities to grow adiabatically in the research areas or tangential research areas that we currently have. I think that one of the strengths of our department is that we find ways for faculty to partner with each other on various projects, whether that's teaching or research. And so working on, filling in, identifying places where we could, the Venn diagram, you've got this and this, and if you just put that one thing in there, it fits nicely. But it's pretty clear from the provost, financially, and from the dean to me, to all of the department chairs and COSAM certainly, that the hiring rates are not going to be much bigger than they have been historically. I like to think about these equilibrium calculations. The easiest way is to just do a kind of seat of the pants estimate for graduate students. When we were running around 50 graduate students, equilibrium value, we were bringing in around 10 graduate students a year, right? And so if you want to go to 75 graduate students equilibrium, we need to recruit and admit 15 graduate students per year. It's a similar thing for faculty. So for us, we currently have, if you don't count me and you don't count the dean, I think we have 22 tenure track or tenured faculty. If you do count us, we have 24, but I think the upper bound of the equilibrium is probably still under 30. But in our strategic plan from some years ago, we were shooting for 25, and we're close to that already. And I think that 25 is absolutely reasonable and probably somewhere. And so the hiring rate associated with that equilibrium level is probably 1 per year-ish. 2, if there's a special circumstances, either an opportunity, or if we lose somebody that's vital to our program, right, or somebody retires that's vital to our program, whatever that is, we can maybe make a case for 2. But even at one or 2 hires per year, or 1 point whatever that is, average, that's actually a growth model for us because we don't anticipate retirements, too many retirements, I think, in the next few years.
So I think that what is your vision for the department for the next couple of 5 years, let's say, to exceed this 25 barrier? So the 25 is what we set up in the last strategic planning.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of, as you said, we kind of reaching close into that one. So what do you see about the future to exceed that?
I would think from a strategic planning point of view, I think we need to be, we need to recognize that we're to some extent there are limits placed on us by the outside, and we need to be realistic and plan accordingly, as opposed to saying we just want 50 faculty and we're going to hire, right? We need to be practical. We already have had proposals from within the department about priorities. We're in the middle of a search for a condensed matter theorist, right? We currently have only 2 tenure track space physicists. There's been a case made for a number of years for someone that is in AMO/Lab Astro, right? There are already cases that we can make, and also in materials growth or quantum materials, right? There are already cases of physics education research. I can list all of the groups, but I think I just did. Biophysics, I didn't list that one. Right? Already, if you just imagine 1 hire in each of our 6 groups, that's 6, right? You're kind of there. So it's hard to really think beyond that in terms of some grand plan. Now, I will say that the center initiative might be one of these special opportunity hires, right? So I know that we have 2 centers that are out of our department. One is a plasma center initiative, and the other one is a computational center initiative, right? And you can organize faculty hires from the provost, additional lines. The provost thinks about these things in terms of lines. You can often advocate for those lines associated with major initiatives like a center. So there would be an opportunity. I guess that answers your question. Ms. Reed?
This is not a really dumb question, but so the curve that you show, expenses versus not earnings but grants. So is there a rule in which cycle you have to be net zero, right? As a department or as a college or as a university? Because you're a nonprofit, right? So how long are you allowed to hold a surplus? Or are you?
That's a complicated question. For extramural funds, generally, you have in your budget the money that you budget for whatever the stuff is, and then you have overhead or indirect costs. To some extent, indirect costs don't expire. They don't have a shelf life. And the funds that are designed explicitly for a specific thing, whether it's a graduate student support or this piece of equipment or materials and supplies, travel, those do have a shelf life, and those are controlled by the funding agency. On the accounting side at the university, we have two kinds of accounts. We have what we call restricted accounts and unrestricted accounts. And so for individual faculty and PIs, they have unrestricted accounts associated with some ICRE return that they get, or they have a startup account that they haven't fully spent because they're new. And those are unrestricted, but then they have their grants that are restricted. So restricted accounts generally have shelf lives, unrestricted accounts don't. So to some extent, you can keep a surplus as long as you want, by just that math. Now, it's not that simple, because if you look at our department and you look at our accounts that, in principle, I would say I govern, which is our main account, and that pays for the copy machines, right? And it pays for colloquium travel. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that goes on. Actually, our salaries are all in there too, for those of us that are on the main account. And then we have an indirect account, and then there's a gift account. Those are the main three, right? And so there's some amount of money that's in reserve, if you will. It's not that much, $1 million or so, maybe a little more.
So there's no, it's my question was, there's no like indication from up there that, hey, your department looks to have like too healthy a budget?
Well, this is what I'm getting to. I'm sorry I'm taking a long way to get there, and maybe this is a long answer to a short, simple question. But because we do this cost sharing with PIs, so people that are really active and successful with extramural funding, they get an indirect cost return. Or maybe someone gets a startup because we really want to recruit them, we offer them a good startup, and then they show up and they get a whole bunch of grants all of a sudden. And so in the individual PIs that have unrestricted accounts, if you add all of those up, we're sitting on millions. Not hundreds of thousands, we are sitting on millions. And so the money that's in the individual PIs adds up. And the problem is, here's the problem, is that the dean now pays attention to that and compares us to the other departments. The provost pays attention to that and compares us to other departments of the university. And I'm sure I would have plenty of warning, but they do send some messages. It's like, you're sitting on too much money, you need to invest it. And so those are the reasons we do reinvest money into the department. So we support IGP programs or RSP, whatever they call it now, or we support this facility project or that facility project. If you work out what the indirect spendable that comes into the department per year, it's something like $800K. And oftentimes most of that goes to a startup for a new professor, but we can spend it on other things too. I mean, we spend it on things like SWIP, PGSA, and buying lunch for Gauss, and small things and big things too.
So having that balance, a good balance, to help a startup would improve the chances of a faculty approval with the provost, or they don't do it?
Sure. Well, we can't make an offer if we don't have the money. But we would never make an offer we didn't have the money to pay for anyways. So then the provost will check, right? No, I think the case that we make when we want to hire someone for the provost is certainly mission over the full mission, but our strength from their eyes in terms of dollars is our extramural funding. In that case you make is this person is going to bring us to the next level of a center or some other research criticality or so on.
I have a couple of questions. One, when I joined 10 years ago, our university used to have like 25,000 people, or 25,000 students. Since then, we grew to a little bit over 30,000. And in the middle, we had pandemic, which enabled all these online courses, and as you said, all this teaching. So how much has our number of credit hours changed
For physics?
for physics due to the increase in the population and the decrease because of the online?
That's a hard number to track, and I don't know if Eric's here, but he has helped me try to look into this to some extent. There he is, yeah. So I will refer to somebody who might be able to help, and you can tell me if I screw this up. The problem is there's confounding variables. So for example, we changed the prereq requirement for general physics, or for engineering physics, that they had to have Calc 1, which shifted the schedule standard from fall to fall spring, right? So there's some confounding variables there. Because of COVID, people started teaching these classes online, and so students are now taking them online at community college instead of taking them at Auburn. We're actually doing some tracking right now to see if we can find longitudinal data that shows they don't perform as well to encourage them to take it here. And so those two big factors, the fact that they're taking them offline and we've had this big calculus change, and we've shifted students from Physics 1000 into aviation physics, which we think is actually going to be a boost long term, coupled with the increased enrollment, it's hard to track. I will tell you this, it's roughly the same. So all of those things seem to, on average, sort of cancel each other out.
The aviation, there was no aviation program before, so that.
What's that?
The aviation is not something we switched because there was no aviation program before.
Yeah, but those students were required to take a physics course. And so, to some extent, it was net neutral, but they can't take an aviation physics course at community college because no community college in the state offers it. And so now that that's in their curriculum model, that actually is going to probably boost. I will say that our budget is not driven entirely by student credit hours. The way the budgets happen at the department level are a little bit, there's more factors in there. The budget at the college level is driven by student credit hours.
And do we see the student population growing, or we think that we're now stabilized?
So there's a couple of, that's a question for Chris Roberts and Vinnie Nathan. And Ed's giving a State of the College address on Wednesday, and I would encourage you to ask him that. The answer is it keeps growing every year, so I guess yes. The Board of Trustees doesn't want it to grow, and if you ask Chris Roberts, he's got some metric that's full-time, on-campus, in-person student, undergraduate. And if you could do that metric, we're still under 25,000. So he hasn't violated the Board of Trustees. We don't feel the pain of it as much as other departments because our classes are generally smaller than other departments. I mean, there are classes in math that are 300 students, flat out, right? And if the enrollment at the university goes up, every student at Auburn, assuming they didn't take the class elsewhere before they came, takes a math class, or 2, or 3, or 4. And so they're running out of space. Not just space, but they're running out of people to teach the classes. And they can't just hire graduate students to teach the classes, because if you hire a graduate student, then you're also committing to a graduate education, which means you need the faculty to mentor and train those graduate students. Right? But the university doesn't want to just hire, or there's a cyclical problem there. And it's actually dangerous. I just did this review at Central Florida where they ballooned really fast some few years ago to 70,000 students, or some number crazy like that. And they have calculus classes that have 1,000 students in them. And at what point are you just watching a YouTube video as opposed to being in a real class? It's where you have a teacher and instruction. So I don't know what the long-term prognosis is. It's not a huge threat to us in some sense because our classes are not bulging.
One last one. So when you mentioned the undergraduate program, you mentioned biomedical track, astronomy track. Maybe it's time to formalize that. And the same thing with an engineering physics track and try to steal or borrow.
So those things are, to some extent, formalized already. They're just not known. They're on the books. And so we're working on doing that already. We're creating flyers to distribute with engineering. We've already got flyers that we're distributing for COSAM events, for biomedical track. And
do we have an
we,
engineering track, for example?
Huh?
Do we have an engineering physics?
No, but our physics degree can be taken with an engineering degree and they can still finish in 4 years. So the current structure, if they have an engineering degree and add a physics degree, that accomplishes what they want, generally. So, and we're still looking into, for example, an astro focus or minor, if we have the bandwidth to teach it.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Ian?
Well, I'm curious, you mentioned at the very beginning about COVID a little bit, but is the department doing anything still, from now on, to deal with those, like, aftershocks of COVID? Or is it more along the lines of we return to normalcy and we're just kind of hoping to ride whatever?
Yeah, I'm not sure specifically what you're talking about. And if you're talking about student mental health, we certainly let students know, or there are certainly resources on campus that are beyond, those kinds of things are beyond our scope. There are a number of things that I don't think will change. For example, the withdraw date for courses is now late in the semester, which actually is very frustrating for administrators, and I'm sure it's frustrating for some of you as educators, as teachers. That's a weird one-way ratchet that's hard to move in the other direction. So I don't know if I don't really know if I follow what you're getting at, Ian. And,
I mean, I'm curious because there's multiple levels to it, of course, but like on the graduate level, there's the very obvious fall off in one particular year of grad students.
Sure.
And some follow-on effects.
That's right. No, I think it was the year before your year. We had maybe 3 in that class.
After,
Yeah. It was after your year. Yeah. No, we anticipate that we would like. I mean, those equilibrium numbers. I think we would like a graduate student population of 75 or possibly even more if we can figure out where to put them all. And that requires, recruiting and admitting around 15 per year. And we would like to see that. I mean, it allows you also to have critical mass for diversity and community that you don't have with just 3 or 4 people where you have isolation. Yeah, Uva.
So how can we all get involved and help getting things right?
That's a great question. So that is a topic for our retreat in May. I want to spend some time talking as a group for that. I plan to lay out in more slides than this. Here are all the places that you can sign up to volunteer to help. Some of those are bigger, and some of those are smaller, but everything helps. And I want to ensure that all of us on the faculty, but also the graduate student organizations, have an opportunity to help. And so, things like recruiting and outreach events, the graduate student organizations have been wonderful in helping with those, and I see increasing the opportunities for that. In terms of faculty, there's a number of standing, if you will, committees or search committees. There's certainly leadership. I listed a few of them here. Graduate, undergraduate, and core course, communications, assessment. And one of the things that I want to try to do is ensure that whoever is helping with those things is passionate about those things so that they can help move them forward. And if you have a suggestion, and this is not you specifically, if anybody has a suggestion, you know what this department really needs? They need someone that does this, and I would like to do that. That I would jump up and down, because that's the best kind of suggestion I get. I often get the suggestion, this department really needs this, and then they walk away. And so I would like, and I'm being a little bit facetious. People do that. I do have that. I do have people come to my office and say, I think we need this, and I'm willing to do it. And that's absolutely the best way. And so having people self-identify what they see the need is and what they're passionate about serving, I think that's the best way to get people involved, is to help people self-identify. Nick?
So we were talking about having undergraduate students do double majors. Is it worthwhile to consider having other majors increase, like have a minor in physics?
We have one on the books.
Yeah, but is it, do you advertise it? Is it easy for them to do? Is it like an extra 2 courses or 1 course where they're just yes, physics minor?
So my notion is that's part of the value add proposition to engineering students. That's the biggest target. Biomedical would be the other possibility.
Would it be the problem the chemistry or biology people and then having more?
Yeah, you can imagine. Yep. And to some extent, we don't we don't gain anything from that, except we get more students in our classes, which might make our classes better.
I didn't know if that added to like the total credit hours. If that's-
Within the budget model, minors don't, yeah, it's complicated. I mean, the amount of courses we teach for our majors, or if minors, if we had them, is in the noise compared to what we teach for other units. But frankly, that's not why, we shouldn't be motivated by that. We really should be motivated by, I mean, Chris Roberts is right. We're a university, and it's our job to have, he calls it elevated student experience. I'm a little bit political, but maybe not quite that political. But it's our job to serve the students, and to serve them by making them prepared, right? And so giving them opportunities to better prepare for what they do after they leave. I just had a student in my office today that is struggling in one of our service courses. And I had to give the speech. Of course we're tough on you because we want you to do better and we want to make you stronger. And so we shouldn't just be motivated by the budgets. But yeah, absolutely the minor is part of the deal.
Can I also ask a hypothetical question?
Yep.
You mentioned how the DEI committee is going to change with upcoming legislation. What does that look like?
Well, I'm on camera here, so I want to be careful. I'm serious.
No, that's okay, that's okay.
I think that we need to ensure that we maintain an inclusive environment for our department, and that includes all stakeholders, faculty, staff, students. And I don't see any obstacles in that bill that will keep us from doing that. I think that there are some improvements we can do with branding. Those are minor things. I think that this also came up in the academic program review. It wasn't one of their major recommendations, but it did come up. Is that right now the DEI committee is self-formed. I tried to do that so that it could be completely independent of me, and I didn't assign anybody to do it. I think that it probably needs to be a little bit more transparent and a little bit more structured with roles, because otherwise you wind up with a committee chair that does a lot, and then other people that do some. And I think we need to better define what that committee looks like, and I think we need to figure out a way for someone else to lead that charge, because we've had the same person leading that charge for almost 4 years. There's bandwidth issues there. So I think restructuring that committee, not as a dictate, but reaching out to that committee and saying, please restructure yourself and tell me how you want to operate to be more effective, is the big idea there. JJ.
I have somehow a follow-up question to that one, to the diversity and inclusiveness. In that sense, it's not related to the bill, but in the sense of, I think in the recent years, the word kind of a globalization has become a bad word. And as you can see, this department in many ways is a product of globalization. And there's a lot of many people from different parts of the world. And the most recent the communication I had with you and the ADR, it shows that there seems to be a lot of actual hope to really do this kind of international collaboration, the international. So some of them are going to be valid. But what I'm surprised is that in the case of so-called non-sensitive country, there's still a lot of hoops to jump. There should be a review on whether those are necessary or helpful to us. Because if we have this habit of saying, if that's too much work, we just don't do it at all, we kind of become more and more isolated.
I don't disagree with you. I will say that a lot of that is, I don't want to, it's to some extent above my pay grade.
Yeah,
These things are driven by
I understand.
policy. Well, I will say, here's my understanding of it, and I'm just learning this. I mean, we've gone through some pretty painful things dealing with visas, or making offers to hire people and not being able to hire them, or even delays with visas, or having issues with travel to a certain country. And I get CC'd on all of that, and sometimes I have to advocate. And even the fact that we now are restructuring the way we do summer support from extramural funding to ensure that it's not 100% from national funding as opposed to unrestricted accounts, like Sarit's earlier question. The funded agencies are getting much tighter and more restrictive. And that is in part because the funding agencies get their money from Congress. And Congress is a political entity.
Yeah.
And you know, the wind blows one way, the wind blows another way. And you know, the wind changes every 2 years to some extent, or every 4 years certainly. And so it's really hard to, I mean, those are forces beyond our control. Now, Auburn University Research Security are really good people to work with, even though they're kind of tough, in the sense that you call a meeting and they say, can we meet today or do you want to meet tomorrow? I mean, they're really responsive. They act generally in an advisory capacity, and their primary mission is to keep the university from losing all of its funding. If we have a significant enough violation, the penalty can be nuclear. And we certainly know of cases, not necessarily at Auburn, I guess there probably are, but we certainly know of cases at other universities where funding for a single PI was frozen from one misstep, right? And so because those things can happen, I feel like those research security people are actually protecting us.
Yeah.
And they're telling us what we can do and what we can't do in response to those things that are beyond our control. Now, you know, there are rules about public employees lobbying. But you're a state employee, and there's certainly opportunities if you want to express your concerns at the federal level or participate in, certainly American Physical Society does these kinds of things. There are mechanisms to do that. Scientists for Change kinds of advocacy. But to some extent, Auburn University Research Security is actually protecting us to keep us from getting in trouble with funding agencies.
I agree with you on that one. So it's not that, I know this is something that goes beyond the chair, even dean at the university level. And also what you said about being the security, being the follow the federal rule, that's all valid. We're not trying to against those things. But I think in some sense, as a faculty member, I would like to look for our leadership as a channel, at least spreading some of our, basically how the physics is supposed to work in the international collaborative environment, and at least passing some of that information to the dean, to the university level, let them know that.
I think that the channel for that is for you and I to meet with, or whoever is interested, for you to initiate it, but to meet with the ADR, to have a discussion, and then possibly develop a coalition of people to take it to the VPR with a specific ask, that you want some better defined guidelines on how to initiate international collaborations for countries not on the sensitive list.
Yeah.
Great, Raphael.
On that note, there's some things that are just issues. Like, for instance, like if you invite some little campus to give a talk,
Yeah.
they're foreigners, even the US, we have to pass them to a security.
I agree. I agree.
I agree. So that's exactly
They're
what I'm
professing
talking
Georgia
about.
Tech.
Right.
They come here, give a talk, they can't without going them through a process.
Yep, so those are, yeah, I mean, that's an example, a little bit in the weeds, but it's an example of a place that's the kind of thing that we can certainly advocate for correction. Right, we just need to have a clear explanation of what the current policy is, a clear explanation of why we think that should be changed and why it should be okay for it to be changed. And if I had something like a memo right in front of me that was written up in a clear way, I'd be happy to push that and meet with people. But again, that's an example of, boy, if that's something that y'all are passionate about, help lead the charge to correct it. And I will join you with that.
I understand we're writing a grant with this foreign entity, and that I completely understand, but invite for a talk, that's it.
I agree. No, there are even challenges with honoraria based on funding sources, and I would say the research security is actually, I've found them to be very agreeable and helpful. I think there are some opportunities to improve our relationship, I'll put it that way, and you can interpret that as you like, with the Office of International Programs. I think there's definitely some work to be done there.
I have a question, or maybe more of an idea. So we're getting closer to Huntsville, and we also know that a lot of our students, as well as the engineering students, they all go work in Huntsville. So instead of those minuses, it may be interesting to look at the masters in applied physics, specifically geared for people who work in Huntsville, and you get the big companies there to pay for their masters. I've seen that now happen with aerospace engineering, where the students graduate, they get employed, and also Grumman praised for their continued education.
So I will say that we as a department have generally avoided recruiting students specifically for a master's degree. And that was driven because we want students to be here long enough to contribute to our research mission. Currently, the way our degree system is structured, you can get a master's degree, I guess, in 2 years with just coursework, a non-thesis master's. And the department or the university, college, whatever, generally would spend 2 years on funding that student as a TA, because as we recruit students, we tell every single one of them, and I do not know of a case where that hasn't happened. As long as they're making adequate progress toward the degree, they're fully funded for 12 months. And so the question is an investment for 2 years of a TA to be able to say we had one more degree, is that ROI? And the extra faculty time to teach those classes. I'm not going to say it is or it isn't, but those are the kinds of, that needs to be a discussion with multiple folks. So I'm not going to say yay or nay other than to say it's not as trivial as you might say, oh, just add this or just add that, right? Because you got to think of bandwidth for people, and you got to think of bandwidth in terms of resources.
Well, I think that many of the graduate classes, specifically the elective, currently don't have enough critical mass. So
that's right.
They have an opposite problem.
Correct. So there's a pro.
So I'll give you another piece of that which we should consider. So the big project we're working on in Huntsville is to do radiation testing. There is a strong need, as evidenced by a National Academy study, but also all of the government and industry folks, anecdotally, that we need to train people to replace the people who are going out of that field of retirement. And there's a huge gap. And they would love to see us, and in fact will probably give us money, to develop workforce development to do this. We also have the example of a student who applied to our program, wasn't accepted, got accepted to electrical engineering, has done phenomenal lab work, in optics work, in quantum systems. He just got a DOE SMART scholarship, which basically pays for all of his graduate studies. He has an internship every summer, and he has a guaranteed job when he leaves here. Those are the types of things we can do if we consider those. And so that applied aspect, there's a market for it, so we should consider it.
Mm-hmm. Can I continue on this? Is that with the recent CHIPS Act, there's a huge demand for smart, trained students going into the semiconductor industry. The industry will get funding nationally because of the CHIPS Act. And workforce development is a huge part of that. NSF specifically told us, we were just back from a conference actually today, from a next generation plasma device, which will be $100 million, whatever. The NSF specifically told us that when you are designing this, think of EPSCoR states, because that's what the federal government wants. The federal government wants to spend money on EPSCoR state, and we are in Alabama, it's an EPSCoR state, right? And of course, the workforce development, as you say, and in our department, we have multiple faculties who work, there is a study, and of course, we make the capacitively coupled plasma discharges. Rupa works on them, very nice controlled electronics, optics, all taken together, which is really, my juniors in West Virginia, my graduate students in San Diego, UC San Diego, they're all sucked up by the industry, the semiconductor industry. And so I think that's a big, 5 years down the lane, not right now, but that's something similar to what.
That also might help on you could imagine that helping on the recruiting side too, advertising and so forth.
And in that garb, I think the more as faculties or as graduate students, we help undergraduate research. I think that's a very big thing.
Yep.
If undergraduate students have any little bit of research experience, they go into great industries, great grad schools, and it often looks amazing.
Great ideas. Anybody else? Eric?
I guess just a small addendum to that is that I've had two thesis master's students, and they've both been very good investments.
Okay.
It's the same amount of work as a PhD student, just, for anyone considering it, but you can still get a return on investment for that, I think. And not just you personally, but like we were discussing, the department's reputation and things like that going forward.
Thanks, Eric.
Again, talking on masters, again, just from background experience, to tag into the industry, students with a master's degree can get a much better job than students with a bachelor's degree. In that sense, UCSD, UC Berkeley, they all started a 1-year extended master's program for their personal in-house undergraduate students, because you have already taken a lot of classes. So they tag extra that 1 year. They can be funded, not funded, whatever, funded to the university or a company or as a TA. But in 1 year, they take some research experience and stuff. And all those students can also use that year as a gap, instead of taking a gap year, they get a year where they upgrade their experience and learning. And that 1 year allows them to even decide that should they go into industry at a higher level or should they go into graduate school. And that has been a very successful thing in UC San Diego. And if we can start talking with the dean.
I think we do have the accelerated master. We have a student.
It's a bachelor's-master's combination.
Yeah.
It got confounded when we changed the structure of our GDE some years ago, which changed the order of our core courses so that they don't all happen in a sequence that makes it trivial. And so I don't think we've had a student do that since whatever the student's name was. Well, we had a really good student that did this a few years ago, and he may be the only student that ever did it. But in principle, that kind of thing is possible. Well, there's some logistical challenges. The way our master's requirements are structured, coupled with how they are offered, to do it in rapid succession. I mean, frankly, we reduced the rate at which we generally offered them. It used to be that you took all 6 of your core courses in 1 year. And we reduced that and spread it out over a year and a half, and then put the GDE, the matriculation exam, based on just 4 of them, to give students, to frankly give students more time to focus on those courses in preparation for matriculation. The consequences of that is that now, if a student wants to go rapidly and get their bachelor's and master's at the same time, we don't offer, it's not trivial to take all those courses at once. Yeah.
So I'll offer this as maybe far further truth, because we certainly can't dig into it in detail, and it'll probably sound like antithetical heresy, but hear me. We should seriously consider, in the vein of that discussion too, how do we connect the applied aspects of what we do more maybe to engineering? There are a lot of people in engineering who are applied physicists for all intents and purposes. I mean, how many of you know there's a person in electrical engineering who does space weather? That's a connection, right? There's a lot of things that I think are starting to mix around. There's a lot of quantum work going on, quantum metrology going on. There's certainly connections with the condensed matter both in electrical engineering. I think there are other opportunities out there where we could do applied work. And I say that because I've had the opportunity to witness the politics of how some of this works in the university. And whether we like it or not, they are the favored child, if you want to use some sort of expression.
Can't beat them, join them, is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying, whatever. I'm just saying that, for example, we would not have been able to do this congressional ask probably for radiation testing if it had not had some tie to engineering.
That's right. That's probably.
And so it's in that vein that I make that statement, and I think that's the bigger thinking part of your slides. How do we do that maybe better? I know there's some complications with doing that, especially when you deal with students. But we should think about how to mix students. We should think about how to mix researchers. We have done it in some cases.
I mean, at a minimum, you can set up that adjunct appointments and have people sit on committees and those kinds of things.
Exactly, right? And so
we do have, we have at least one that is adjunct in engineering now. So and making more cross-pollination opportunities like that is pretty straightforward. But you have to identify the connections, and to some extent, those connections have to be self-identified. And so the burden is on our scientists to go look and say, hey, over in engineering does stuff like, go have lunch with that person. And that initiative has to come from somewhere. And I don't think a top-down, I'm not about to go say, hey, Mike, I need you to go meet with this professor because it looks like they do what you do.
No, I think that's true, but to some extent, you don't even know who to talk to, right? And so I think that's where people like Alan and Mark as ADRs can share notes. And I know they do already to some extent. But coming up with mechanisms to even know so they know what we are capable of and us to know what they're capable of.
Yeah,
So
okay.
we should figure that out. I mean, it's been happenstance that, some of us have been plugged in.
Yep. Last one, Eric, we're going to run it up on.
All right, well, it's directly related. We should think about this not just from a research perspective, but if we want more engineering, physics, double majors, I think we need to really carefully think about that in our teaching as well. Because, I mean, we have lots and lots of data about how, these engineering students come out of 1600 feeling like physics is less useful than when they start the class, right? And so that's not great for an engineer to think, because they're going to use a lot of it. And so, just thinking not just from a applied research, but also an applied learning perspective. Engineers don't think about physics in the same way we do, and they're not excited by the same proofs and, toy problems and things like that. So it's something to think about.
All right. Let's conclude so Steve can get out of here. All right, thank you.